Hello there, I'm Dominic St-Pierre, and you're listening to Go Podcast. Today I talk about how I think Go is very good at building a web application. Hello, Gophers. Another solo episode this week. So I will be talking about the state of web development in Go, where I think it's at, and spoiler alert. I think we are in a very good place these days with web development. To be frank, I will unpack that for sure in this episode. But let's just tell the story of what happened and why I wanted to talk about this. So I started a small web project a couple of weeks ago. Nothing complicated. Just a good old web application that that you will have some front end, that you will have some back end, kind of similar to what one could build in Rails or Django, to be frank. So a back end. Mostly CRUD operation, but with some kind of UI for users to do their stuff. And when I was starting the parsing of the templates, it's always like that for me. I never really remember exactly how I did that the last time. How I structure the directory for my templates. How do I make sure that I do have some kind of layout and view kind of hierarchy, if you will. So where you have I don't know, a master page. I don't know how to say that. I know it's a .NET word, but let's say that you have a main template, and in that template you have some kind of block that the view that you are currently in is currently filling. For example, there could be a title block in the main page or the layout page, in some kind of content block or whatever, and inside the view, then you just define those things. And Go template HTML/template package is already handling all of that. But I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's not clear or anything like that. But each time I'm faced with having to decide, how to structure my things, and most importantly, how to parse those template, because you still want to keep some kind of order if it's going to be a project with multiple views. And let's just make some distinction right at the beginning. I'm not talking about a small microservice thing that just do 3 queries to the database and have one page. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a good old web application that do it all, that do have probably maybe 100 of tables in the database. So it could still be seen as a monolith, but it's what I call a web application from the good old days, where you don't really need to extract any microservices at this point, because this thing does not need to scale at all. So yes, I mean, because we are not all Netflix and Cloudflares and whatever, those big organizations. Sometimes the project are just a little bit simpler, and there's no team, and there's just no need. So at this point, you want to build a web application in Go, and there's ways to make that very fun and comfortable. So why not just use frameworks that are made for that? Like I was saying, Rails or Django, or maybe even ASP.NET, MVC and whatnot. Well, I want to I want to stay in Go. I do like that. I think that we are at a place now where we can safely say that the standard library is kind of comfortable enough to at least consider using Go for these types of application. And myself, I've been a very strong advocate of using the standard library. In fact, I wrote a book in 2018, which the main topic was mainly that. I mean, you don't really need more than the standard library, and if you are, make sure that you understand the implication of a choice of a library or frameworks. And like most people, when I started doing web development in Go at first, I used a framework, or it was more a library in that time, because I was coming from, I have this .NET background, and I had sometimes in Node and things like that, and it's more common to use some kind of framework. But when you have the richness of the standard library in Go, then it's okay to not use a library if you don't want to. If you want to, by all means, I mean, go ahead. It's not it's not a super one or two. It's not a binary choice here. To be frank, there's some nuances and whatnot, but I think the state of of the standard library HTTP package, net HTTP, is very good. But for me, the templates was kind of still a point that was making me a little bit uncomfortable. And yes, you have things like Temple, you have other library that tries to make make a difference in that space, but I want to stay in standard HTML file. This, I do like the directives, and I do like everything that the HTML template package offers me. What I don't really like was how I needed to remember, or at least go find the information on how to really structure those templates and have some kinds of pieces of reusable component and whatnot. I mean, it's not complicated, don't get me wrong, but I created a library for that. And my idea was to I wanted to build something for me. I mean, it's not even something I expect to have some kind of traction or anything. It's just for me that, what, this is how I think templates should be structured. This is how the directories and the file names should be structured and things like that. And I took the time to also incorporate some kind of multi-language feature in there, because at the end of the day, this is something in Quebec that we are faced often. We are a bilingual province. In fact, the Canada has French and English as the main language here. So I mean, it's not very infrequent to build multilingual website in here, or at least web application and things like that. So I took the liberty of doing that, and I started as well an internationalization piece where this was something that I really like in .NET. To be frank, the all the culture and the local, when you were displaying dates and currencies, that was good. So I kind of started that. The idea of just using some kind of function in the func map of the template. So basically, the library is kind of opinionated on how you should create your directories and the file names and things like that for the views. But once you adapt this, it's pretty much out of your way, because at the end of the day, it's basically just using the HTML template to do its thing. So I've also added an XSRF token in there. So basically, there's a struct that is passed to all of the views. And normally when you execute a template, you just pass some data, which is an interface. But now there's a type in this library that do have the language, the local, there's a data as well. So the normal structure that you would pass is also encapsulated in that structure. But there's also an XSRF token field and things like that. So I'm just trying to give some order and discipline to myself with the templates aspect, because after creating some web application in the last 6 months and so in Django, I kind of found it interesting, how the views or the templates or whatever, there's a lot of helpers in there and things like that. So we do have the func map that is a great way to enrich all the directive that we already have with HTML template. And yes, I'm planning on using that library to do that. And yes, I mean, if anyone wants to check it out, it's on GitHub. I will. There's a link on the show notes. It's St-Pierre /TPL. So I call it TPL. So for me, this kind of handle all the structuring, the parsing, and the rendering of HTML template without me having to return to my old project and say, how did I did that? How can I have some partials that are parsed with my template, but I also want a layout page for my templates and things like that. Because at some point, what I was doing for smaller project, because the way that the HTML template package is done, there were a couple of ways to just, have to repeat the HTML and the head and the title and things like that in all your templates. Basically, that was maybe the way to go a long time ago, but I think it was with Go, I believe 1.8, that they introduced the block and the define key directive in theirs. But even that, just having to remember how to parse your layout with all the pages and things like that. So I kind of enforce a directory structure where, let's say you want to have 2 or 3 different base layout. Let's say you want a layout when the user is not authenticated and one when they are. So basically you can have a layout page called, I don't know, not authenticated.html and authenticated.html. And inside of views directory, you can create 2 subdirectories with unauthenticated and authenticated, which match directly the name of the layout, and the pages that are saved there will be parsed with the layout and all of the partials things. So let's say you want to reuse some HTML component here and there, like a main navigation, or maybe it's a footer, or it could be I don't know. It could be anything that just can be rendered, and this will also be parsed with all the views. So it's just it's nothing. It does not bring much to the table for only that, but just to remove the the fact that I need the cognitive load on me to remember all of this crap, because let's face it, it's not very fun to just have to do that each time. So I wanted an helper. If it helps anyone, cool. If not, well, I'm using it, which is why I did it. So that's that. But I also think that having some kind of locale and some kind of dates and currencies rendering with the proper currency symbol and whatnot, and the proper way of formatting the decimal. This could be a nice helper. So that's it for the template. And now, I mean, the second pieces for me that they really nailed down in 122, is obviously the new. I won't say the new routing feature, because at the end of the day, it's just a way to name your path directly in your endl func or endl function, and that is great. I mean, first of all, if you haven't seen that, there's not much need for a router these days due to that. And a lot of people will probably say, well, the router comes with a lot of middlewares and things like that. Middlewares are just, one function, couple of lines of code long. So do you really need to bring an external router for that? Now that we do have parameterized URL, and also we can bound a specific endl func with a verb now. So you can prefix your root with something like post, for example. So you would say, I don't know, http.endlfunc, open paren, quote, double quote. You would have post and slash blog, for example, and or slash blog slash create. And if you were to do an HTTP get to that, you will automatically get a method not allowed HTTP status for that. So not a huge change, but I mean it did not really bother me, to be frank, in the previous version, where you could do all of the HTTP verb on a specific path, if you will. I was kind of mostly using an if block if I knew that I was going to be receiving some HTTP post in there. So I would do if r.method equal http.method post, for example. But now, I mean, it's built in there. So not a huge change, not something that will change my life as a backend developer, but it's nice. It's nice to have that. The parameter URL, the fact that you can now put some values in this with braces. This is great, but again, I mean, I was just having a one function previous to that, something called like I don't know, get URL params, and I was passing the request, and from that I was extracting. So I was extracting the value at certain positions. So I was calling this get URL param. I was passing the request, and the second parameter would be, what position you want the value of. So if you can imagine a path separated by slash, so slash blog slash create. If you want the second parameter, you would get create. So if we were to have slash blog slash detail slash one, you would call this function with the request itself and tree, and you would receive the string one. Sorry. So again, it's just a small quality of life. Now you can just do, there's a path value in on the request structure itself, the HTTP request, and now you can just receive or call or get the value by the name of the parameter. So if you have slash blog slash detail slash brace ID, for example, you can do r.path value ID. So this is great. Again, not throwing me out of my chair, or I don't know how to say that. We have this saying in French, but in French, but in Quebec actually. Without entering into too much history and geographical things, I am not a French from France. I am a French Canadian from Quebec. So we do speak very, very differently. Um, so closing this aside. So I mean, yes. So this is not super revolution. I don't know. I cannot say that. It's not going to revolutionize how you do things. It's just some quality of life. And for me, the template was still something that was not polished enough for me to say, when you have a very quick CRUD application to build, you can do that in Go instead of Django or Rails. But nowadays, I believe that it is possible to in terms of times. And the last piece that I finally decided to use is SQL C. And I've done an episode on databases very, very early in it was probably 2 years ago. I think it was episode 4 or 5, whatever. For me, database, it always felt a little bit too verbose in Go, and I'm not a fan of ORM as well. So I've been doing data all my career. I've been, living in SQL all my life. So for me, it's not about typing queries. I'm not talking about having to type SQL queries. I'm talking about how the database SQL makes you repeat yourself a lot if you don't want to use reflection and or other libraries like SQL X, for example. So I always look at SQL C and this is interesting, but I don't know. I mean, it felt strange to use an external tool to generate Go code. But I tried it very, very, I more thoroughly lately, and this is great. This is probably the missing pieces for me for making sure that I do have fun writing some simple web monolith application in Go, because now I can just write my query in SQL and let this tool generate all the repetitive stuff that I did not really mind. And what I was doing previously was I created some snippet in VS Code, to be frank, and I was something like db create. I was doing tab, and boom, it was just generating the structure, and I could just fill the blank, if you will. So for me, it was still kind of quick to create database access code, but it was not fun. It was certainly not fun. And after that, when it's not fully generated, if you have part of your application that is not fully generated, and you do have a lot of repetition, if something is to change, then it means that you have a lot to change. So I kind of tried to be a little bit more open-minded and just tried the thing, because I tried the POG base back in the days in I think it was in Clojure, if I'm not mistaken. One of my friends started to write some Clojure at some point, and I was curious, so I did that for a couple of months. And there were the same kind of idea there, that you were writing the SQL queries outside and the code was generated. This is great. So So with the templates out of the way, and now the database, you know, it's pretty quick to write your queries. Just do a SQL C generate, and you're done. So I enjoyed that. My last piece was to fix, how to fix the SQL migration, and for that, I decided to just use my own logic, which is so simple. I mean, when you think about that, what is a migration? Do I really need all of this going down route? So I just created a super simple table in Postgres that do have a field, a version field. I do have a directory where I'm going to create a SQL file with some with 4 digits at the beginning of them, and I'm just checking in the database. What is the last version? What is the last version in this directory? And if there's anything new, then I'm running a transaction on the database, and I update the version on. That's it. I mean, it's less than, I don't know, it's less than 40 line of code. Did not really needed more. I wrote something like that for a static backend actually. So yeah, I decided to just do that. So now I do have a very kind of easy way to upgrade the schema. That might be one thing that I'm not fond of, and I think that is mainly why I was not using SQL C. Is the schema file. To me, I would still prefer if this thing was just looking at the database for the schema. That would be, I don't know, for me that would be less of a pain, if you will, because now you have to maintain this file. It's just a little bit strange to me. I would have done something like, just look at the database, inspect, maybe have some kind of reference somewhere that you can compare the schema on the database. If anything changed, then or just generate always based on the database. That could be simpler. I don't know. I'm still unclear why we are required to have this schema file, to be frank, because it's not handling the migration. So it's imply that you will have some kind of solution already for migration. So why bother having a schema file then? If the database is going to be upgraded and migrated itself from somewhere else, then would it not be, simpler just to check the database for the schema instead of having this flat file on the project? So that was a blocker that I had, but it's not the end of the world, to be frank. But I mean, something sometimes you see something that distract you or bother you, and you don't really want to use a library or a tool. So for me, it was that. It was not really writing the SQL, although I'm already starting to think that having one file, and maybe there's a way to have multiple files. It's not like I have read the entire documentation of SQL C, but I can see myself having some difficulties accepting to have only one file, because at the end of the day, it will probably just get very verbose out there. If we retake this example of having a web application with 100 SQL tables, for example, how many queries would you have if you are to start to having, I don't know, 400, 500 queries in that file? I mean, I would still prefer to separate those probably per table or per, use case or anything like that. So maybe it's something I would add to my makefile. Just cat some separate file into this query .sql. That SQL is one thing. So I would basically just do that to keep some kind of order in my SQL queries, because yes, I don't know yet. It's not. I'm not there. I only have a handful of queries now, and I'm still under 20. But already I can start to see that having just one file is going to be interesting. But again, maybe it's already done. I don't know. The fact is, I think we are in a very, very good place now these days. And to be frank, yes, I don't believe that Go is to be rejected right away for a simpler project and CRUD, monolithic CRUD. I like application, web application. It's now pretty quick to do that, and almost entirely with the standard library. And I would not even count SQL C as a dependencies, as it's an external tool. So it's a dependencies in a sense, but it's not in my Go mod, for example. So I don't have these dependencies in my project per se. So I kind of like that. So yes, I mean, we are good. So where are we going from here? I mean, it's just nice, and it's the same, it's the same benefits for doing microservices. So I mean, those new addition in 122 for all the routing and stuff, it's nice, and returning to middleware. I mean, middleware is just a function that accepts an HTTP handler and return an HTTP handler, and you can chain those very, very easily with just a 4 line of code functions. So that is your middleware there right away. So I don't really see anything complicated, and this makes you a better web backend developers, just having to think about how to architect that, and yes, I will need my authorization middleware before this and that and things like that. So you are kind of responsible of building your web application the way you want. I think this makes projects a little bit longer live and easier to maintain. The less dependencies that you have, the less complicated time, or at least the time to get used to a project is lower, because everyone is knowing, all Go developers knows about the standard library. So again, I mean, that's it. That's it for this week. I think if you want to try it out, I might have some kind of blog post. Maybe I will have some videos. I do have a YouTube channel that I'm trying to revive. So I might have some more content about that, because I think we are in a very, very good place without having to bother with the burden of having a frameworks, and this is great. On that, see you next time. All right, that's it for this week. I would really appreciate if you can talk or share about this podcast. It's always helpful. Also, another way to support this show is by purchasing my course. There's always a link in the show notes. So on that, see you next week.